There are three reasons, and only three reasons why individuals leave companies or organizations. This is it. There's only three reasons. There's not 33. There's not 101. There's three reasons why individuals leave, are not successful, put it to you like that. Number one is clarity. We're not clear with individuals about roles, responsibilities, job assignments, and tasks. Number two is motivation. Individuals aren't motivated to do. The third one is capacity. Their plate is too full. Because that's when the stress comes in. That's where you get overwhelmed. That's where you get overworked. And I know you can say, well, Dr. Mack, you're saying that, you work 80 hours a week. You're right, I do. But at the end of the day, still being able to balance on those pieces is key.
The last time Dr. Michael Maclin joined Heliona Insight's podcast, we had a wonderful conversation about how DEI isn't a department, it's a mindset. Since then, the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion has shifted. Some companies are doubling down while others are pulling back. But one thing remains true. Inclusion is not just a corporate initiative. It's the foundation of how we build workplaces where people truly belong. And that's why I'm very excited to have Dr. Mack back on the podcast. As a leader, educator, and advocate, he spent years pushing beyond surface level DEI work to focus on what really matters, creating environments where inclusion is not just policy driven, but people driven. In this episode, we are digging deeper into inclusion, what it really means, why it's more critical now than ever, and how leaders can move beyond performative efforts to create lasting impact. If you care about building workplaces where people feel valued, heard, and empowered, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. So let's get into it. Hey, Dr. Mack, welcome back. This is the second time that I'm having you on this podcast. And the last time we spoke, you shared something that kind of sat with me, which is that DEI is not a mindset.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not a department, but a mindset.
Yeah.
Since that conversation, what have you noticed as far as shifts, within your organization and just in general?
So first of all, I want to say I'm happy to be here, honored to be here. I thank you for. This is one of my most favorite podcasts to be able to attend, to be on. And so I'm excited to be here. I know that you have some individuals who are on the podcast, Abraham, who are CEOs and do pretty good things. And so anytime that I can take up a little time, I'm honored to be here. And just the work that you do is just so needed.
Of course.
Not only for communities that we serve, but also for where we are at a time in this country. So I think your question is, really since I was here last, what shifts have we seen?
Yeah.
So I want to kind of talk about really two different spaces, Abraham, kind of before our latest shift, the last shift, and then after kind of that last shift, right? And so I think it's important to know, and I'm just going to be sipping tea while we.
You good? You just flew just to be here. Drink away.
I appreciate it. I think it's important to know that before our most recent shift, Abraham, that you saw a really big focus on DEIA. If you go back and just look at some of the key pieces, just as it relates to companies and organizations that really started with at the time before departments, it was really about a movement. Go back to Shirley Chisholm and what those pieces were. And so, if you just look at some of the latest data, just regarding some of those pieces, the McKinsey report said since 2022 here that 50% of their companies, and again, this is before the latest shift, had increased their DEI efforts.
Right.
I think you can say the similar thing just regarding just budget initiatives and what those pieces really mean. So I think that's pre-shift. Now, let's talk about after the shift, because after the shift, you're seeing another mindset of DEI and really kind of what those pieces mean. You see restructurings. You see also vernacular or vocabulary that has changed.
Right.
And I think a lot of that really has to do with funding. Those funding pieces are key,
Right.
have been able to change those shifts. So there's two pieces to that shift since the last time I was here.
Right. And like what exactly are, especially on the funding side, like what kind of shift have you seen, I guess, since the post, like the post shift?
Yeah.
So far?
Well, of course, I think the biggest piece is you talk about, education. I mean, the education department, has eliminated $600 million.
Right.
Right. So I think those pieces around education, I think is key, just around some of the biggest shift. And I think that funding piece is key because there are a lot of individuals that depend on funding in many different spaces and places,
right.
To meet the needs of individuals.
Right.
And so I think that's a major shift, not only for schools, but for organizations, for companies.
Right.
All right. They depend on funding also.
Right.
And so to eliminate that funding is key also.
Right. And you did mention before the shift happened, you talked about a report where 50% increase in like DEI initiatives within companies, and after the shift, you talked about language even changing. Can you go a little bit deeper into that? Especially the McKinsey report, which talked about an increase, and then after the shift, now we're seeing massive decrease and also change in language.
Yeah. So the McKinsey report was a great report, and that report came out. It really just looked at what were the DEI efforts really, and how those pieces being measured and monitored. And so what the report had noted that since really 21, 22, that companies had increased their DEI efforts, whether that's training, whether that's department, whether that's in the hiring processes, by almost 50%. And that increase really came into a monetary component.
Right.
So you think about that, Abraham, what that pieces really mean in putting that effort in. So I think that's number one. After the shift, you are seeing the decrease in budget. And that decrease in budget, unfortunately, is what companies and organizations really have to stand by.
Right.
And what I mean by stand by is really impacts them. Because at the end of the day, those pieces play a formidable role in any company or any organization. If you're a company, or let's just say if you're a school, school district or school, and your funding, from a federal level is, 50, 60, 70 million dollars, right? Those pieces play an impact in decision making.
Right.
So I think you see those pieces. And then the next piece is just around language.
Right.
I firmly believe in our differences make us unique, and how do we celebrate those differences? But I think not acknowledging those differences is key. And let me give you a little gem here, Abraham. I always come and give you a little gem, right? The first time it was about the fence, tearing down the fence. The last time it was about DEI department. When we talk about diversity, we have to be very, very clear that, of course, yes, ethnicity, race, gender, all those pieces of diversity. But the very first diversity is diversity of thought.
Right.
And so how do you put individuals in a room who don't necessarily have the same mental model to come out with an outcome that benefits everyone? Right. And so those are key pieces, just as we talk about vocabulary and language of vernacular.
I like that. And like, what's the impact in, I guess in this question on the corporate side, and then also education, especially diversity of thought, because I think there's still a misunderstanding when it comes to diversity in general.
Yeah.
And I like the way that you put it the last time you were here. Diversity is not a DEI is not a department, but it's a mindset.
Yeah.
That's why even today the language have gone like so far from what DEI actually is. But I do want to know like the impact of all of that happening, and how are you seeing that in your industry as in education, and also as in corporate?
So I think first thing, the most recent shift in impact in corporate and education, I think both of them, you're seeing restructuring of roles. Right? You're not seeing dedicated individuals who are leading those initiatives. I think that's number one, and that's in corporation and education space. So I think that impact is there. I think two, also in the sectors of both of those pieces, you really see individuals who are under a lot of political pressure.
Right.
And that political pressure is challenging and tough, just to what those pieces really mean for companies and education and organizations. Because you work with companies all the time.
Right.
And unfortunately, individuals, succumb to political pressure, and then really what those pieces mean. So I think the restructuring, I think political pressure, and then I think just being frank, the resistance and backlash. Right, what do those pieces really mean? But again, I think all of that, a lot of that comes from really lack of understanding.
Yeah.
Seeking not to understand, I think is key. I think at the end of the day, Abraham, that's why it's so important for individuals to understand DEIA or DEIB, DIAB, belonging, right? Accessibility, acceptance, just what those pieces really mean.
Right. No, yeah, it's like so heartbreaking to see, today, just how much fear and and how much people are impacted by they don't even want to talk about DEI because they're like, I don't want to deal with this at all. And it breaks my heart because I'm like, this is because I've traveled a lot and I've met so many different people and even down to my teams, whenever I hire individuals that are from different cultures, different background, like just the the input that I get from that diverse team, it's so powerful and it's so unique. But I do want to talk about inclusion because that's something that I notice has been a huge rise, especially the focus around just DEI. I see it slowly coming into inclusion. Even SHRM now, their focus is like inclusion. They talk more about inclusion. And I know we kind of talked about that the last time you were here a little bit. I want to hear from you, like, how would you define what inclusion is, and how can companies start including everybody within their company?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of misnomers about inclusion. And again, this is not, this is Dr. Maclin's verbiage and thoughts around inclusion and what these pieces really mean. So let me say this to you, Abraham. The reason why most companies or organizations or individuals struggle with inclusion is because inclusion, and I'm going to define it as simply as this, as those individuals being at the table to make the decision.
Right.
You can't make decisions about individuals, decide, practice, policy, procedures, and then include them.
Right.
The decision's already made. Right. And companies and organizations around don't do a very good job of that. Now, I understand at the end of the day, there's some decisions that have to be made. But I will tell you that the inclusionary mindset and the inclusionary practices, that's why it fails. And again, I would say that if I'm making the rules and I'm inviting you, really, do you really have a say-so?
Right.
Do you really have a say-so? Right. And so I think those pieces are key. And that's we're the latest report showed we're about 130 years behind in the gender gap. 130 years behind in the gender gap. I firmly believe, and I know that some of the people who are listening to this podcast may not like this piece, but I'm going to give you my thoughts. So I firmly believe that women, if they have the same chance that men have, that they work just as hard, they're just as smart. But I don't believe they're given the same chance. As a matter of fact, data will show us that women don't apply for a job unless they're 100% qualified. And men will apply at 40% qualified.
Right.
So that's right. I mean, right? Think about it. Right? Hey, I'm just missing this. That's okay. I'm going to send the application. Right? So at the end of the day, how, and again, that comes also down to, probably some political pieces, but how can a man make a decision about a woman's body?
Right.
So those inclusionary pieces at the end of the day is really being able to talk about, how are those who are impacted at the table being a part of the decision-making process.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, even me, the more I look into inclusion, another area that I notice is there's so many different generations in the workplace, almost 6 different generations today. And then, it's how do you include all of those generations, at the table when the decisions are being made?
And I will tell you that when you look at, our millennials who are working, millennials want to know. A buddy of mine leads an organization, and he said that they were putting the top 3 things together that millennials wanted to know. They wanted to know their social justice stance, the company's social justice stance. They wanted to know about flexible working hours, what those pieces meant. And then they wanted to know the ability to climb the ladder. So what does that mean for mobility? Now, you don't hear anything in there about retirement plans. You don't hear anything in there about health benefits at the end of the day, right? And again, how do you work with those individuals, and how do you make those individuals there? And that's also a part of the diversity gap. Right. Because again, that's not race, ethnicity, or gender, but that's a huge gap at the end of the day. And so those pieces are key.
Right. And when it comes to inclusion, and this is for myself in general, because I made some big mistakes just hiring people, because for some reason. My team is, again, I have a very diverse team. I made a very stupid decision where, I was so excited about it, but then a little half of the team were like, no, we're not interested. And then I was like, well, shit, I just spent so much money doing this, and now they're not interested. I kind of got hurt, which I've gotten over it by just listening to them and hearing what they have to say. But how can companies make sure that they don't fall into that trap? But also realizing that, including people from different backgrounds that are within your company, and how much is that, I guess what I'm trying to ask is how do you even measure just the inclusion aspect?
Great question. So, a lot of companies and organizations do surveys because they're convenient. They even do focus groups. Throw those out the window.
No more focus groups.
No more focus groups. No more focus groups and no more surveys. Somebody's going to say, why, Dr. Maclin? Well, because a survey is only as good as the person who feels that you're going to do something with the survey. So if I've been working for your organization or your company and I've never felt included, my chance of taking your survey is probably not very good, because I don't think you're going to do anything with it anyway. Same thing, focus groups, right? I always say that there's 2 ways that companies can powerfully measure inclusion in the organization.
Let's see.
The first one is participation in the decision-making process. What is the representation at the table in the decision-making process? That's number 1. Number 2, show me the money. Let's look at pay inequities, right? And see what those pieces are, and see where that trail leads. I think those are two places to start. Now, those are hard places to start, right? But those are 2 places to start to see, where the inclusionary aspects are, and where it ends and where it lies.
Right. No, yeah, that makes sense, because if you're going to make a decision for an entire body of people and not on a cultural level, not really understand what motivates them, what inspires them, which I made the mistake.
Well, and again, it's about Abraham. It's about really, and as a company, it's about really how good of job are you doing?
Right.
There was a young boy he walked into a corner store and asked the clerk to use the phone. And so he used the phone, and he called a young lady, elderly lady, and he said to the elderly lady, "Don't, Mrs. Abraham," he said, hey, I would like to cut your grass. And the elderly lady said something like, "Hey, that's okay." And he said, No. I only want to cut your grass, but I want to cut your grass for free. The elder lady on the end said, "That's okay. That's okay." And then he said, "No, ma'am. I want to cut your grass for free, but I also want to rake your leaves." She said, "That's okay." He hung up the phone. The clerk heard the call.
Right.
The clerk walks over to him and says, "Hey, young man, guess what? I'm in need of help. I need someone to help me around the shop." And the young man says, "That's okay." And the clerk says, "Wait, I'm confused. I just heard you on the phone, and you asked the lady if you could cut her grass and cut it for free." And the young boy says, "No, that's okay." And then the clerk says, "Wait, son, I don't get it. Can you tell me?" And the young boy looked at him and smiled and said, "I wasn't looking for a job. I wanted to know how good a job I was doing."
Interesting.
He already was cutting her grass.
Yeah.
But what he wanted to see
if she's going to be like, yeah, wow, that's deep.
Right. So
it's very psychological.
As spaces and places, right? We all have a job to do.
Right.
But the question is, how good a job are we doing? Right. And how do we measure those pieces?
Right. So he's in that analogy, he's like measuring himself.
100%.
And the lady says, "No, actually, sure, yes, come in." Then he's like, "Okay, well, I'm losing my job."
I must not be doing a good job. Right. She says, "Hey, come on in," and that tells you that he's doing a good job because he said, "Hey, I want to cut your grass for free." Right. That's a true story, Abraham.
She's like, "No, I'm good. I like my person.
I like what I'm getting." Right. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, we have to ensure that we are, companies, organizations are measuring themselves. Right. And what are those tools they're using to be able to measure?
I like that. And like, is there like a correlation between like psychological safety and also inclusion? Because I talk to a lot of people, and one of the things that they share during the DEI era is like psychological safety. Making sure that people feel safe in the companies that they work with. But now all these things happen, people don't feel safe anymore. But like, how do you make sure those two, elements work together in a time where DEI is being attacked on every angle?
Yeah. Psychological safety is hard these days, but psychological safety also really depends on an individual taking care of themselves.
Right.
Because there is a standpoint, there is a piece of psychological safety where if Abraham needs something, Abraham has to be able to advocate for himself to be able to get those pieces. Right. Now, the psychological safety piece comes in, and that Abraham truly understanding that his voice will be listened to. He will be heard. And a lot of times it may not mean that Abraham gets what he wants, but he knows that his voice will be heard. Right. He'll know he'll be listened to. And at the end of the day, there'll be a conversation to be able to have some of those pieces. The psychological safety stems around Abraham not even being able to ask. Right. And so again, that's the inclusionary pieces. Now, studies show, right, that individuals feel most safe around people who identify. Right. And that's a no-brainer, right? But on the end of the day, how do we open those spaces and places of psychological safety, diversity safety, mental diversity safety, right? Where we can have those spaces and places and to be able to thrive.
Right. Wait, so like, how do you make sure that companies don't realize that this is important, but not just call everything DEI? Because lately that is the language that I see.
Say more about that. Say a little more.
Yeah, because when it comes to like mental health, for example, I genuinely had a conversation with a leader who literally told me, "Well, that's just another DEI thing." And I was like, "Do you even know what that is?" So it feels like anything that has to do with empathy, taking care of people. Now the language is it's becoming just generalized like as a DEI thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think and that's my struggle when people say, well-being, wellness.
Yes.
Oh, that's just another DEI thing.
Yeah.
And I say, wait. People taking care of themselves?
Right.
It is a DEI thing?
Right.
Like, let's separate some of this, right? We're taking race, ethnicity, gender out. We're talking about people being able to get the service that they need, whether it's from a mental health component whether it's a physical component, right? And you really, how you separate those things is really being able to have a clear line, right? Measure twice, cut once, right? A clear line of what those pieces are and how they impact the organization. Because I will tell you that, and I think that's another misnomer. And Abraham, you're an expert on this, so you could talk about this more than me. But I have a disdain for individuals who don't think mental health is just as important as physical health. Right. And a lot of times in spaces and places we do that, right? Because a lot of times mental illness is what we can't see, right? But it's just as much important or more important, right? As physical health.
No, yeah. Even with me, like over the years, I've been trying to communicate just the importance of mental health. And it's been one of the biggest battles that I've ever taken on for the past 7 years, actually 8 years now. It's even older than my son. Me like running the Freedom Project back then, which I changed the name to Forum. But like it was such a huge battle until I started like linking mental health to the actual bottom line. And then people are actually now listening, which, you know, because I spoke to a healthcare CEO and then he told me that, burnout links to people, ending up leaving the company. And when that happens, because he runs a 100-person team, actually 100,000 team with 100, management team, and then also I think another 200 middle management. So he said it's costing them around, $650K to I think like $2.5 or $2.6 million every year on like churning, people. And he, since it's healthcare, he knows that burnout is one of the biggest problems, which is linked to mental health. Like, individuals are not feeling great about working at the company, even though they've done everything that, he said they've done everything that they can. I have some hesitation in believing they're doing everything they can, but like he did share that they've done everything they can, but still they're still experiencing people leaving. And I did a kind of like one-on-one with almost 200 different healthcare workers within the company. It took me like a whole month to do that. And one of the biggest feedback that I got is like, we're not being paid enough. But to them, it's like, oh, why are they leaving? We're spending almost $2.6 million every year on just like churn because we can't keep a staff. But then when I, talked to the staff, I found out that they don't feel like they're doing anything to bring value to the hospital because they're coming to see their patients, but they're burnt out, they're tired, they're even afraid of making a mistake. So all these things are happening. But then what the biggest problem is like, they don't feel like they're being compensated properly. But it all goes back to the mental health component, which companies tend to overlook. That's my experience.
Well, and I will tell you, Abraham, note this. There are three reasons and only three reasons why individuals leave companies or organizations. This is it. There's only three reasons. There's not 33. There's not 101. There's three reasons why individuals are not successful. Put it to you like that. Number one is clarity. Number one is clarity. We're not clear with individuals about roles, responsibilities, job assignments, and tasks. Right? How can you ever get to A to B if we're not clear about what steps you need to take to be able to get there? Right. Yeah. Clarity.
That's very important.
Right. Think about it. Right. Think about just the conciseness and what it means to be clear about the job at hand on the task. And yeah, you have a job description, but that's not clarity. Right. That's not clarity. So number one is clarity. Number two is motivation. Individuals aren't motivated to do. Now, there's a couple of umbrellas underneath motivation. That could be mental health. That could be stressed out. That could be, at the end of the day, not being in a space and place where they feel welcome or foster inclusion. Right? But if I don't feel motivated, and pay is never number one. Pay may be number three. But pay is not 1 and 2. Because I can pay you all the money in the world and have you walk into a place where you're discriminated against and you won't stay. Right? Clarity, motivation. The third one, probably, which is the most powerful one, there's only 3 reasons why individuals are not successful or leave organizations. The third one is capacity. Their plate is too full. You just cannot ask individuals to do more.
Right.
It just does not work that way, because that's when the stress comes in. That's where you get overwhelmed. That's where you get overworked. And I know you can say, well, Dr. Mack, you're saying that, you work 80 hours a week. You're right, I do. But at the end of the day, still being able to balance on those pieces is key. And so that capacity is key.
Right.
I remember I was talking to an individual who said that they were just burned out. And they said they went to their supervisor and said, hey, my plate is full. The supervisor said to them, you got two options. You need to eat faster or get a bigger plate.
Oh, that's funny.
Right. And I said, what'd you do? And they said, that was my last day there. Right. So those are the only three reasons, Abraham, to your point. Those are the only three reasons. Right.
Wow. No, yeah. I definitely have an employee that I need to be clear with ASAP after this conversation. So thank you for that. But yeah. So what was the second C again? So you talked about clarity and also capacity, but the second C just kind of went over.
Well, the second one was motivation.
Motivation.
Right.
Okay.
But you could exchange that second C for motivation for communication. Right.
CCC.
There you go. And what those pieces are like, the three C's. Right. And they're interchangeable what those pieces are. But those are three reasons. And everyone has an employee or who's working with someone who's in that space and place. Right.
So let's say that you have an opportunity to consult someone and then you have to break those three C's down to them. How would you explain making sure that they're clear with their people? How would that look like?
So, clarity, people think that clarity a lot of times is about setting expectations. And there are spaces and places where you need to set expectations. But clarity at the end of the day, a lot of times just means we need to bring about a conversation so that when someone's stuck or someone is questioning or someone doesn't know, you provide that clarity. Because I can give you an expectation, Abraham. I can say, to someone, hey, my expectation is that you're going to dunk a basketball. But if you don't have that God-given gift, it's not there, right? So then how do you bring that person back and have a conversation about what that expectation is and what those pieces really mean, right? So and a lot of times that should happen on the forefront. See, we like to have clarity conversations at the end, or at the middle, but those pieces should happen at the forefront.
Right. Well, that's a great point. Thank you for that. And this is for me, by the way. And then the second C, so communication or motivation.
Communication.
What would that look like?
Or motivation. So I think at the end of the day, you have to find out what motivates. Is it intrinsic? Is it extrinsic?
Right.
The motivation should be the outcome of what the company goals are. Right. So if you're working with student success should be the motivation. Right. And what those pieces really mean. Right. And then the communication should be around that. Right. It is a lot of times it's not that individuals don't know how, but the communication isn't there. And so how do we communicate that with individuals so that they have those tools? And a lot of times communication is about providing the person with tools in the tool belt. Because how can you ever answer a question if you haven't been clearly communicated with?
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Wow. This is really good. And then the final C, which was capacity. How does that look like and how would you explain that?
Well, I think a lot of times we think about physical capacity, but I will argue that mental capacity is even more. Right. How do you ensure that individuals mentally leave work at work and don't have to take work home? I don't mean physical, I mean mentally. Because that mental capacity is key. And then when person's plates are full or get to the point of being full, how are your leader being able to delve into and say, hey, how can I help you with this? Or what do we need to do? What are the next steps of some of these pieces? Those are the only three reasons. Only three reasons, Abraham.
Right. Wow. Well, again, I forgot the order.
It's okay. That's all right. That's okay. Clarity. Right.
Communication and also capacity.
You got it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Because after this podcast, the first thing I want to do, I want to call them and get a meeting for the Monday.
So you're going to be clear with them.
Be like, all right. It was like the three C's of communication.
There you go.
Let's break it down.
There you go.
So what exactly is next now with everything going on and, just the pressure that people are feeling, especially in your industry, education, what's next right now?
Well, I think, hopefully individuals in whatever space and place they're in.
Right.
That we as educational leaders are able to provide an inclusive environment.
Right.
We owe that to individuals, and we owe that to students and staff.
Right.
I will tell you, Abraham, that if you look at just country's history, right, and you look at just some of these key pieces, I mean, the 60s was the Civil Rights Act, right? 70s, Shirley Chisholm.
Right.
You move on to the 80s and 90s, and you start to see organizations adopt DEIA or DEI. George Floyd brought on a different movement from what those pieces are.
Right.
And so there's ebbs and flows in what those pieces are. And so, at the end of the day, if you're asking Dr. Maclin, what does he want?
Right.
What does he need? I need all individuals and their differences to be celebrated.
Right.
Because those differences is what make them unique.
Indeed. Absolutely. Well, we've got to the end of this. I feel like this is more of a masterclass. I'm realizing I have to go communicate with a few people on my team right now. But like after everything that we've talked about and everything that's going on, like how's your spirit right now?
Well, I think for me, I have hope. I have optimism, but I also truly understand that there is no act that's going to create change. Right? And what I mean by that is, yes, the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Right.
Right. But I can tell you right now, from 64 until now, there's still individuals who would say that I've been discriminated against. Right. There is no act. It's about actions.
Right.
Right. How do we show those actions as leaders? And how do we ensure that at the end of the day that we are being change agents, which is key.
Well, right. Wow. Well, thank you so much. It's like always an honor to have you on the podcast just to talk about and also learn about things that I need to work on more. So thank you for that. And like, is there anything that I have not asked you yet that you think we need to talk about? I'll
leave the podcast with this. When my brother bought his first house, Abraham, went to his house and the neighbor's grass just looked amazing.
Right.
And I noticed it. So about 2 weeks later, I went and took my mom there. She was still living, and took my mom there. When we got out the car, the first thing she noticed was the neighbor's grass. And so my brother's grass did not look like the neighbor's grass.
Right.
I mean, you could eat off of it. And so my brother, he went and spent money on a landscaper, right? Then he put in a irrigation system, sprinkler system, right? And his grass still didn't look like the neighbor's grass.
Right.
And so one day I pulled up and the neighbor was outside. And I said, let me see what this gentleman does to his grass, because it's just amazing.
Right.
Lush, green. So I walked up to him and I said, hey, you may not know him. He said, yeah, I know your brother. You see you here. And I said, I just got one question for you, sir. And he said, what's that? I said, my brother's trying to get his grass like yours, and your grass is just amazing. How do you keep it? What do you do to it? What are the fertilizer you use? He looked at me and smiled and said, it's artificial.
Oh my God.
So I say that to say, if there's one advice that I can give individuals on the podcast, is be true to who you are.
Right.
Right. Be true to who you are.
Indeed.
Right. Because at the end of the day, that's what stands. I had a great leader once tell me, don't ever be a chameleon. Right. What you stand for is what you stand for. So be true to who you are.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I'm just going to cut it here because I know we're going to have you back with how everything is shifting. There's so much happening. People are confused.
Yeah. Well, Abraham, you're doing great things too.
I do my best.
Appreciate those pieces.
But yeah, thank you so much again for being here today. And I'll drop links if you guys want to, get in touch with Dr. Mac or have any questions. I'm sure he'll be open to it. But again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Of course.